And we're back with another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Welcome back. We're going to be talking the old pigskin, NFL, talking about all that good stuff. Thanks again for joining us, Gerald Glasser from the Lakers Fast Break and Pop Culture Cosmos, along with my good friend, the man behind all the great stuff that he does, are his great shows. Indeed, you got to go ahead and check him out on what he does whenever he stops on by. It is my good friend, Mr. Chris Lardieri. Chris, great to have you here. One half of the Domination Sports Nation. What's going on, my friend?
Great to be back. Can't believe it's been almost 3 months since we last talked here in this venue. Time is flying by.
It does indeed. But it is as we do our annual checkup on the NFL with the NFL draft. Before we get into the NFL draft, there was obviously the potpourri of usual suspects going from here to there with the NFL free agency period. I know we talked a little bit about some movement during that happening. Nothing earth shattering, but let's say Saquon Barkley going to the Eagles, but I won't say that. Your thoughts, my friend, on any movement that you think might shift the playing field towards another team outside of the Philadelphia Eagles, my friend?
Yeah, within their own division, I think the Washington Commanders made an interesting move. They traded for Debo Samuel, so they got Jaden Daniels, another weapon. And, the 49ers are running out of money to pay wide receivers, I guess. They had to part with him. So that was one that stuck out to me. And then two, the quarterback shuffled around. Aaron Rodgers is still out there. I think is good news for teams that thought they were going to hitch their wagon to him. The Jets learned that the hard way, so he's not back. I think the one thing that surprised me is that Kirk Cousins was not dealt. I thought maybe a team like the Steelers or the Browns, who needed a veteran quarterback to kind of plug in for a year, might make a run on him at him. So I'm not quite sure what the Falcons are doing. Clearly, Penix is going to be the starter. They're keeping Cousins around because they're paying him, but boy, is he an expensive backup.
That he is. That was kind of surprising that they didn't offload him somewhere else. Maybe it's the fact that the buyer's market says maybe he just it's time for him to start to see a slide with Kirk Cousins, and maybe he's just not worth that value on that contract, Chris.
Absolutely. And I think, we know quarterbacks get hurt in this league, maybe as the season goes on or even in training camp. If something happens, a team will be willing to make a run at him, rent him for a year. The other thing that kind of interests me is the Seahawks doing a QB flip. They dealt Geno Smith to the Raiders, reuniting him with his former coach, Pete Carroll, and then signed Sam Darnold to a 3-year deal. So I guess they think Darnold's year last year with Minnesota was not a fluke, and that he's worth it. I do feel, though, his last regular season game and then the poor performance in the wild card game against the Rams probably cost them some money. So Seahawks didn't have to pay him as much, but that's something interesting to keep an eye on. And then for all the rumors of the Rams looking like they were giving up on Matt Stafford, that's not happening. I think they make one more attempt at a Super Bowl run with him as quarterback this year.
But the question is, do they have enough as far as options be able to go ahead and get it to where they need to get it to on both sides of the ball? So one of the ways you do that is through the NFL draft. And your thoughts on that? Cam Ward goes number one. Travis Hunter, the next Deion Sanders in the making, possibly, went number two. I know that, again, this draft was hijacked and taken over by the drama known as Shaddeur Sanders, and then also the other Sanders that didn't even get drafted. Your thoughts first up at the top of the draft board, the first round primarily. Who stands out to be as a pick, or teams making a pick or picks you think in those first early rounds you think is really going to be something that's going to pay off down the road?
Well, I think the Jags must think that Travis Hunter is this generational talent because they gave up a boatload to trade to two with the Browns, and kudos to them for acquiring picks and kind of kicking the can down the road for next year when there's a deeper quarterback class, but more on that later. My
Did
question is
did they really? Did they really? That's all I'll say.
Yeah, that too. But is Hunter a wide receiver or is he a cornerback? They keep going back and forth on that. So it's a steep price to pay for a guy whose role you don't know. I think there are, all these comparisons now coming out there to Shohei Ohtani is going to be the first two-way NFL star in the modern era in the 21st century, whatever you like. But I'm curious to see what position he picks because he's not going to be able to play both sides of the ball. I'm sure he could fill in here and there. You know, as a cornerback if say he decides to dedicate his career to receiver. But that's a big question mark right there. The pick that didn't really surprise a lot of people is kind of the worst kept secret, but I think for fantasy owners will probably have some big ramifications this year is the first running back coming off the board at number 6, Ashton Genty from Boise State. And we know Pete Carroll loves to run the ball. And with Geno, I'm not saying Geno's the greatest quarterback at his age, but he's solid. He knows Pete Carroll's offense, and he's a hell of an improvement over what the Raiders have had the past few years. And I think Genty's going to get a lot of touches. They looking at the early lines, he's already the favorite for offensive rookie of the year. And I think fantasy owners need to keep an eye on him. Could he be like a more productive B. John Robinson? We shall see. But right off the bat with the early picks, I think that's the one that fantasy owners need to take note of.
Once again, it's Inside Sports Fantasy Football along with Chris Lardieri. It's me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks again for watching this. I truly appreciate you joining us, everyone. For our members who got this first on the Lakers Fast Break, truly cannot thank you enough for doing so. For everyone listening on audio, truly cannot thank you enough for stopping by right here for you on Apple Podcasts and, of course, Spotify as well. Chris Lardieri for the Domination Sports Nation, along with me, Gerald Glassford. It is the NFL Draft. I don't want to get into it yet with Cleveland because that's a conversation in and of itself. Because you said they wanted to kick the can down the line because there's a deeper quarterback class. But again, we will touch on that in just a second. I know you talked about the Raiders focusing in on the running back, and they, like you said, it was a very terrible secret because the GM went in saying, I want running back. This shift leaning a little bit back towards the running back. Do you see this continuing to happen, or is it going to be a hybrid where some teams will just keep on selling out to the pass, and some will start venturing back to what it was with the run?
I think for the time being, there may be a split, but we all know in professional sports, everyone loves to follow the trends, and the trends are set by the champions. And the Eagles did that by acquiring Saquon Barkley, and we saw what it did for their offense. There were some people out there who thought he should have been MVP last year, but at the end of the day, the Chiefs keying on Saquon Barkley in the Super Bowl made Jalen Hurts the MVP. So it just makes your offense more multidimensional. I personally like it. I'm not saying teams need to run the ball 50 times down your throat like good 70s and 80s NFC football, for instance, but I think it makes it a more enjoyable game. And you can look at some of the coaches who are kind of ahead of the curve on this. And for instance, Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers. He's got a franchise quarterback in Justin Herbert, but he tried J.K. Dobbins at running back last year. Unfortunately, he's hurt a lot. Gus Edwards, they parted ways with him. So what do they do there towards the end of the first round? They go and they draft themselves a running back. He and Greg Roman are basically saying we're going to pound the ball down your throat, and then when you stack the line, Justin Herbert's going to beat you. So Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina was their pick. I love these draft experts. Some thought he was a reach, but at the end of the day, if there's a player you like and you want him in a position of need, you take him. I don't recall any Hall of Fame ceremonies at Canton where they said, player so and so is a Hall of Famer, but the team really reached on him when they picked him. None of this matters. It's for the Mel Kipers of the world, and more on him later.
Indeed, indeed. But again, we don't want to make this about one player, even though this draft will always be remembered for just one player, which is kind of sad. The one thing I do want to mention is that after Cam Ward, you said this wasn't a good year for quarterbacks. The next quarterback taken was by your Giants. And I did question you about that. Jackson Dart, who I did see quite a bit of in his first year at USC, did show some promise, but Was a little consistent in his time in Mississippi, but he's heading to the Giants now. He was not going into the draft the second-rated quarterback by many experts' opinions, which again we'll go on in later. But your thoughts on the reasons why there's such a deep drop off from the first quarterback taken to the next?
There are just some years where the talent isn't there, but I think big picture at a macro level, um, there are in the NCAA quarterbacks who, basically are pro ready and run these pro style offenses with a lot of motion and short passing and things like that. But these guys don't learn the game like you do in the NFL. They got flashcards to signal in plays for them and things like that. The knock on Dart was that Kiffin was calling all his plays at Ole Miss. So I think at that point, you've got to wonder if some of these guys are NFL ready, and then they get rushed to the pros and they become bombs. And there was a lot of that with Baker Mayfield with Cleveland, and now that he's had a few years to develop, similarly with Sam Darnold, they changed teams, new scenery, new coach, and these guys seem to have finally gotten it. And they figured out how to play the NFL quarterback. And this goes back to the old NFL that you and I know, where a quarterback was drafted, he developed, maybe he sat half a year, maybe he sat a full year. But the perfect example for our modern era of football is Patrick Mahomes. He sat behind Alex Smith for a year, learned the offense under one of the greatest offensive minds ever, Andy Reid, and now look at him, barring anything catastrophic injury wise, likely to be a Hall of Famer. So I think that's kind of what the Giants are thinking there. We know Dable liked Dart. He liked his physical attributes. He liked the way he reads the defenses supposedly. They're already throwing out comparisons to Josh Allen, which is laughable. But I think in the sense that he is a quarterback who can move and is not afraid to run. I think there they have similarities, but they also have another similarity in that when Josh Allen came out, people forget this. The knock on him was that yeah, he's big, but he's inaccurate. He throws a lot of interceptions. He played against weak competition, and now look at him. He clearly one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So I don't know why the drop off happens within a specific year, but big picture, I feel like these quarterbacks in college, just in general, whether they're immensely talented or not, are not NFL ready. I feel like there's complete flukes. You look at Caleb Williams, who was the consensus number one pick last year, struggled with the Bears, and he's got all the tools, and played at USC under a great offensive coach, and you just don't know. And then too, the team's always picking quarterbacks earlier, the ones that have bad records and not a lot of talent around them. So these guys struggle.
They do indeed. So we'll see exactly which quarterbacks and players coming into the NFL will thrive, which programs, which NFL teams have the best platforms for their rookies to grow in. But I would be remiss if I didn't go ahead and include the guy that, again, just the huge drama that was behind it. I personally saw a little bit of Shaddeur Sanders. I thought he was going to be right there as a late first rounder, second rounder. I just saw him. I see things in him on the field. Okay, you could take the off the field stuff. You could take his dad, whatever. Okay. On the field, I saw a product that showed a lot more promise than I think what was given for as far as the fifth rounder is concerned. Um, I don't think all these experts are wrong in their assessments of it. Maybe if you want to put him behind Dart, maybe a couple others, okay, fine. But to see him fall down to the fifth round and on a team that drafted him in the Cleveland Browns that already drafted quarterback, which is just insane for a team that now has like 15 quarterbacks. So you say they kick the can down the road because there's a deeper quarterback draft next summer, which again, in order to do that, they're going to have to draft a quarterback and they're going to have to get rid of like 15 quarterbacks now. So I'm going to say that I think Cleveland is one of the worst draft, picks, the series of draft picks, one of the worst teams drafting in this year's draft, simply because of fact, yes, they got the picks and they got the extra stuff they needed from Jacksonville, but utilizing that same knowledge, they also drafted, like, again, two quarterbacks in the same draft. Again, it's just mind-boggling to me. I think Shaddeur Sanders can play in this league. I do think that there's going to be a place if he's given that opportunity. And I don't know now that he's the second guy in this draft, not to mention what they have already and who else is going to be coming back from injury. Your thoughts on this whole fiasco, why he dropped so far? Again, I know a lot of the drama is played out because of who his father is, but also the fact that the guy was really talented in college. The guy played on a major league platform. Okay, we always say what you could always say what you want about Deion Sanders, about prime time, doing the commercials, the TV show, coaching. He coached and improved Colorado Buffalo's team to a pretty good record and a bowl victory, if I'm not mistaken. Had two really good players that now moved on to the NFL. One was actually very correctly, I think, evaluated in Travis Hunter. And I think another in Shaddeur Sanders that I think people, I don't want to say missed the boat on, but there was something going on with these teams. I don't want to say collusion might have been involved, but you know what? This kid is not a fifth rounder, in my opinion. Just my
Agreed.
opinion.
Agreed. And the Browns are, what they did is questionable, to be generous. When they pass on him in round two, that's why I figured, all right, they're looking to wait for a quarterback until next year. They're just going to plug someone in or maybe hope Cousins becomes available. But to take Dylan Gabriel that high and then in the fifth round get Sanders makes zero sense. I mean, if you like Sanders, take him in the third round. There's
Yeah.
tremendous value there. I think he fell for two reasons. One, there was a lot of buzz before the draft that the guy basically, whether he sandbagged his interviews or had an attitude problem. That's not going to work well in the NFL. There are professional sports leagues, or maybe you get away with that, but the NFL has always been that way. Quarterbacks have fallen forever. So if you want to say there's collusion, I guess there was collusion that Dan Marino fell to the Miami Dolphins in 1983 when Ken O'Brien from the football juggernaut of UC Davis was taken by the Jets before him. There are always reasons. There was a rumor that he was on drugs or he had a bad attitude. I don't remember exactly what, but these things happen. Happened with Aaron Rodgers in '05. So it's also a function of there are only a certain amount of teams that need quarterbacks. And once the Saints and the Steelers passed on him in round one, you figure someone would want. I personally thought Vegas would take a crack at him because he could develop. Gino was only going to be there probably a couple of years. He's getting on in years, but I'm surprised they didn't even take a crack at him, given Pete Carroll, is a very player friendly coach and likes working with guys like that. So I'm not quite sure. Clearly, they they sent him a message, but to go to the fifth round, I mean, was kind of mind boggling to me. Do I think he was the number two quarterback in the draft? I don't know, but if he was, he shouldn't be going in the fifth round. But again, you get a stigma, you get an attitude. GMs start whispering, and it turns into a free fall. We've seen it happen many times in this league, especially with quarterbacks.
I agree with you, even though Sean Magic Man is happy that they didn't pick him. I thought he was going to the Raiders personally. I was actually thinking that that was a perfect gamble that the Raiders, it fit the Raiders' MO to take that type of player and that type of gamble in the second, third, or fourth round. And as he kept going farther and farther down, then it became almost ridiculous. Personally, to see how far a talent like that, then you're just sending a message. The NFL was sending a message with each round. The NFL was sending a bigger and bigger message to Shaddeur Sanders.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly what it was. It was. Hopefully, it's a message he got, and he learns from this. But I find it ironic that the Sanders family director of propaganda, Mel Kiper, is screaming throughout the draft about this, and then comparing him to Tom Brady at 199. Well, Tom Brady did not fall. Tom Brady was not expected to be picked that high. Did he go in the seventh round versus the fifth or sixth, or maybe the consensus was? Yeah, but this is apples and oranges. I'd also like to point out to Mel that Tom Brady made sure that the Raiders didn't draft Shaddeur Sanders. So,
Yeah,
put
Brock
that into
Purdy,
your
same
analysis
thing.
too.
Brock Purdy was considered a late draft pick, and that's exactly where he was picked. Was right where he was projected to be.
Yeah. I do think though, like, you could talk about in any number of walks of life, whether it be Wall Street or sports handicapping. these consensus, these estimates, these projections, they're all a load of crap. It's a crapshoot. It's a guessing game. And the draft itself is a crapshoot. You look at anything with a grade right now, it's laughable. Um, did Michael Strahan, Hall of Famer, when the Giants drafted him from Texas Southern, I was like, who is this guy and why are they drafting him? You just don't know. I mean, these guys are all immensely talented, whether they're picked in the first or sixth round, but at the same time, they got to get in the right system and they got to work hard. This is the big leagues, it's a business. They don't, they don't give you the job and coddle you. You either sink or swim in the NFL. So hopefully Shador learns. But again, what the Browns are doing, picking two quarterbacks that close when Dylan Gabriel is a nice college player, but I'll give you this. You could say what you want about Shador Sanders' attitude. I wouldn't have picked him after Dylan Gabriel. I would have, in a million years, I would have thought he'd go in the third round, not Dylan Gabriel.
But the thing is, if you're Cleveland, and I'm going to have you pick your winners and losers before we head on out. If you're Cleveland, they correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think did they win the last Super Bowl? Am I don't know. When your team does not win the last Super Bowl, you need depth.
Yep.
You have certain positions that you need filled, and Cleveland, who had a terrible season last year, certainly needed more than just to get two quarterbacks in the same draft. You only have a finite number of chances at the apple, and to pick the same individual slot, and as far as if there were two wide receivers, okay. If they were two running backs, okay. If they're two linemen, okay. They're two quarterbacks, yes. Cornerbacks, I said, but not quarterbacks. Quarterbacks, you should only pick one and then develop that one if you think it's going to work out. That's just
absolutely. Yeah. And then too, before the draft, what are the Browns doing bringing Joe Flacco back and trading for Kenny Pickett? Like, what is it with that quarterback room?
Again, it's crazy. But if Joe plays, pick him in the first two games, use him for the first two games, and then get rid of him as fast as you can.
Yeah.
And I'll just leave it at that. But once again, it is Chris Lardieri from the Domination Sports Nation, along with me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much again for watching this. But before we head on out, I want to go ahead and hear Chris's thoughts on the NFL winners and losers in the NFL draft. You could use as many as you want. It doesn't have to be just 2, 3, or 4. You could be as many teams you feel really took advantage of this draft to start off with. We'll start off with your winners. We'll start off with the high note for anybody that's listening or watching. Say, you know what? He picked my team. So let me know who are the teams that you feel really took advantage of this year's NFL draft.
So, I'm not being a homer here, but I was happy with the Giants draft, and
That's a
let's be
first.
clear.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's a first since George Young was general manager. No, but anyway, I like the Abdul Carter pick. I wasn't sure if Shane would do something silly or trade out of it or, try and pick some player he didn't need. But if Carter stays healthy, he's the pass rusher they need on a defensive line that already has Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence. Kayvon Thibodeau's erratic. So if they end up letting him walk in the road, I think Carter's an excellent upgrade on the line. And Jackson Dart's a big question mark. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, they got their franchise quarterback. I don't know if they did. But given that they leapfrogged the Rams, and there was one report out there that, and you saw this, the Rams traded out of that pick immediately after the Giants picked Dart, that perhaps Sean McVay was enamored with Dart and wanted to make him Stafford's successor. So I guess there's some room for optimism there, but it's got to play out on the field. I do like Cam Scadaboo out of Arizona State, guy who ran all over Texas in the playoff game. I like his style. The Giants already have Tyrod Tracy at running back, who had a nice rookie year. So they've got a good two-headed monster there. And then drafting some positions of need later on in the draft, like offensive line. So on paper, it looks like the Giants did a good job. I also like the aforementioned LA Chargers with Hampton at running back. I don't care if they reached on him or not. He's a good player. They need a running back. Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman love to run the ball, and the Najee Harrison have a lot of depth at that position. Then in the second round, they take one of Dart's former targets at Ole Miss, Trey Harris at wide receiver. Pair him up with Lad McConkey. They've got two good young receivers. So I think that's definitely going to help them. Later on, they picked Aronde Gadsden, a tight end out of Syracuse, who people think was a good value pick. And then just across the room there at SoFi, I like what the Rams did. Now, they're famous for trading their number one picks, but this year they absolutely ripped off the Falcons, who moved up to take a questionable defensive end. They pocketed a next year's first round when the Giants immediately in front of them didn't even give up a first rounder to move to 24. So Les Snead really fleeced them. I think that pick will be valuable next year. And then too, they made some nice picks on the defensive side of the ball. The pick I like is Terrence Ferguson, number 46 overall, an underrated tight end out of Oregon. The Rams have kind of struggled not really having that tight end target for Matthew Stafford the last few years between injuries and guys not panning out. So if he does, I think that's a nice pick there. On the flip side, teams that did poorly, I'm not thrilled with what Jacksonville did trading up. And if you listen to their new, very young GM give a very theoretical and inspired spiritual speech about the way Travis Hunter makes him feel, I think Hunter can be a great talent, but that's a steep price to pay to trade up to get him. And look, the jury's still out on Trevor Lawrence. I know they gave him a lot of money, but at this rate, now that Daniel Jones is gone, that could potentially be one of the worst quarterback contracts in the NFL in a number of years. Before I forget, on the good side, and I'm kind of taking a big picture approach here, not just with the draft. In general, I like what the Bears have done this offseason. You get Ben Johnson, one of the best young offensive minds in football, as your head coach. You poach him away from division rival the Lions. You address the offensive line issues, which, basically had Caleb Williams, looking to throw the ball after about a second and a half because he was running for his life at times. So I think that was a good there, with Johnson being a major upgrade as at head coach. Matt Eberflus was, just a mess to say the least. So I think that's a big plus there. And then they went out and drafted a tight end, Colston Loveland, which I think is also going to help Caleb Williams. So I do like what the Bears did there. They addressed positions of need later in the draft, but just kind of looking at it from a fantasy perspective, maybe Caleb Williams makes the leap in year two and becomes not only a better NFL quarterback, but someone worth having on your fantasy team. And then two, I did like what the Raiders did taking Genty, but that team's got so many holes. I don't know how he's going to do behind that line. I mean, he's going to get a lot of touches, so I think I wouldn't be surprised to see him be a first round pick in fantasy. But again, Pete Carroll, is he a retread? Is he over the hill? We'll see this year, but I'll give the Raiders credit in this. They picked what everyone thought was the best running back in the draft. Physically, let's see if he holds up through the season.
I'm going to say I just like one specific team that you didn't mention, I don't think, and that's the Tampa Bay Bucks. They had only a few draft picks, but what they did with the draft picks, they focused in on did something different. When you're limited, sometimes you only have 3, 4, 5 picks. You just go ahead and you try to pick one here, and one here, and maybe you try to go ahead and just get a little sprinkle of everything. They focused on 3 positions where they needed the most at wide receiver, edge, and cornerback. So they improved their speed. They improved as far as, because they're wide receivers, their situation as far as contracts, injuries. The wide receivers have been talented, but there've been a lot of injuries there. I think they did a pretty good job as far as what they needed to do to shore up some areas of need. Now, the free agency period comes when they had to go ahead and make sure they got those other areas. They took care of how they take care of the line, linebackers, etc. But I really liked the fact that they had limited picks and they focused in on the areas. So if, let's say Jacob Parrish doesn't work out. They drafted Benjamin Morris. What if Egbuka as a first rounder doesn't work out? Then again, they drafted Tez Johnson. I think might be actually might have a shot at from Oregon. They're edge rushers. What if Elijah Roberts doesn't work out as the edge? Then they have David Walker. They have a pick and a backup to that pick just in case it doesn't work out. I thought that was very smart, Chris, with limited picks.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Gerald, because you look at what the Rams did last year, going defense, and people criticized it. Well, look at how phenomenal Verse was and how a team that everyone had, basically written for dead with the retirement of Aaron Donald, their defense helped carry them at various points through the season. And they're a play away from beating the Super Bowl champs in Philly in the divisional round. Let's not forget that. So, yeah, I'm wondering too if we talked about this earlier with the follow leader approach in the NFL, if teams will start figuring that out. All right, I've got an issue here. I better address it. I better take a couple swings at it. So if one guy doesn't pan out, I've got another guy that could step in. Or in general, you just need depth in the NFL. Guys get hurt. Guys do. It's very rare, especially on both sides of the line, on the line of scrimmage, that those guys play all 17 games. They get banged up. So I think that's an excellent approach. And like you said, the Bucks wide receivers aren't getting any younger, so it was good that they addressed that as well.
So before we end it out, we have the winners and losers for the NFL draft. Chris, it's always great to have you back. Again, Chris Lardieri for the Domination Sports Nation. I know you and Dom always come up with some great stuff when you guys have time. What's up next for the Domination Sports Nation?
Back from our extended spring break, Dom's high school track and field season finally concluded. So we got plenty to talk about, including NBA playoffs. The Knicks and Pistons seem to be involved in a series that, I had to rub my eyes. I thought it was 1995 and not 2025 with all the non-foul calls and aggression, different kind of basketball than, most people are used to watching these days. The Clippers Nuggets series looks intriguing. The Warriors look like they're about to pull away from the Rockets. So we got plenty of basketball to talk about. In addition to the NFL draft, MLB's about to finish up the first month of the season. What's going on there? Who are the surprises? Who are the underachieving teams? And then, two, it's never too early to start thinking about some college football down the road, too. Before you know it, we're going to be in summer and those preseason polls will come out. And for someone like me, I'm just going to need a website or some sort of tracker to keep track of who changed to what team, thanks to this whole NIL world we live in.
Exactly. Indeed. It's kind of funny how that is just like, what, gone today, here today, gone tomorrow. Indeed. So we'll see how it plays out. But once again, it is Chris Lardieri along with Dominic Lardieri. They are the Domination Sports Nation. Thank you so much. As always, Chris, I look forward to another season of Inside Sports Fantasy Football coming up later this year. So for Chris Lardieri, it's Gerald Glasser. Thanks again for watching, listening. Truly appreciate it. If you're watching this as a member, the Lakers Fast Break, cannot thank you enough for doing so. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, thank you again as well. And if you're watching this after the fact, when this comes out, for everyone else, cannot thank you enough for stopping by to talk NFL right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football.